Let's go.
Okay, afternoon, church. How's everyone doing today? Yeah, I have a feeling that I missed something yesterday. Was yesterday a special day or something?
No, I did.
No, not really. Someone said, oh, it was
Yeah, it
Valentine's
was
Day,
nobody.
right? Oh, okay. You guys have a great time? You take your wives out and have a good time?
Yeah, right.
I have to confess, Laura and I went out yesterday. We just went around in Harrogate, took her to a little bakery. We got like 4 sausage rolls, spent less than £2, and we had a great time. Well, we'll have to admit, my wife and I, we have 3 anniversaries that we celebrate, really 4, but we met in Germany. So, we had, I guess the city hall type marriage in Germany. So we celebrate that December 23rd, just before Christmas. So, and then on Valentine's Day in Florida, we had a ceremony for my parents. And then February 24th, we had, a ceremony for her family in Peru.
Wow.
So I'm all set. If I forget one anniversary, I got 2 more to go. But I believe someone else had a birthday yesterday.
Yes.
Cousin's mom,
Yes.
70 years old. So
17 years young.
70 years.
there you go. There you go. Yeah, so continuing on our theme here, walking each other home. A lot of things ran through my mind. What can I talk about? What is that walking each other home? I think Yami and other speakers over the past few weeks have been giving their take on that as well. But, it kind of reflects the idea of supporting one another through life's journey. So in a biblical context, it kind of aligns with the teaching, what the Bible teaches about love, unity, and helping each other as we navigate our spiritual paths together. But this can take many forms, right? I mean, I think the number one is encouragement. And we're called to, in Hebrews, we're called to do that daily. Like I said, when the teens and the adults come up here to sing, I was just telling Yami last week, man, I could never do that. I have a terrible voice. I have no rhythm, forget it. Same thing with dancing. After Laura said yes to the altar, I gave up dancing. It served its purpose. But I like what Tifa said about, I guess, comparison.
Okay.
Comparison is the stealer of joy.
Right.
And what Dan says about kind of giving up stuff. We give up a lot as we go through our spiritual walk with Christ. We find things to give up that over time, and I can see why Paul got to that point saying, you know what? That's all rubbish now. Everything I thought that was important is not important anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Hence the 4 sausage rolls we had. They're pretty good. I still can't figure out why I'm on the couch tonight. So. Okay, but on top of encouragement, it's about praying together. In Matthew 18, it says, when 2 or more gather, Christ is there.
Yeah.
But praying together is a form of encouragement because you pour out your heart. Fellowship, what we're doing here today, what we do right after church, midweeks, whenever that takes place. That fellowship, we can't do it alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
We need each other's support.
Yeah.
With fellowship, we get that encouragement. But also sharing wisdom. It's not just receiving it. You see a brother or sister, they're struggling through something, offer that. That also encourages them. Give a little bit of wisdom. And then it says anyone who has 2 shirts should share with one who has none. And anyone who has food should do the same. When sometimes, when you go, you use like a public restroom, sometimes you see a sign on the outside or on the inside for the disability one. And it says some disabilities are not visible, either that we have. 50% disabled. But you would never see that. You know, I'm a type 1 diabetic. There. 50%. Someone who, you know, can't, you know, he's in a wheelchair, Oscar. See, and a lot of
Yeah.
I mean, it don't have to be that, but lots of things, you know, find work related. You know, and we don't like to, like I said, burden anybody with that, but we, you know, exact opposite of that. Okay. You know, they were anything but supportive. In fact, they were exploiting their fellow Jews, people within their own family. You know, I kind of think of these are the ancestors of the Pharisees, because they only look to their own needs and not the needs of the community. Yomi's message last Sunday talked about the walls and the gates. You know, what we let in, you know, can impact us both positively, you know, let's say fellowship, encouragement, and negativity into our lives usually comes from the world. But Nehemiah 5 points out that sometimes trouble can come from within those walls. You know, it addresses the internal strife among the Jewish people during the rebuilding of the walls and the economic oppression and, frankly, you know, exploitation of the poor by the wealthy and nobles. So sometimes internal conflicts, you know, can be just as damaging as the persecution we might receive from outside the church. Okay. So the Bible addresses internal threats, particularly, you know, in the context of spiritual dangers. You know, when we go it alone, that's a spiritual danger, I think. If we just sit there, we don't come to church, we don't fellowship, you know, Satan, you know, looks for those people. It's kind of like a lion out in the savannah trying to separate the wildebeest, one wildebeest from the pack. You know, you're alone. You know, and then Satan's just going to chew you up. Okay. Oh, so we kind of need to remain in the fellowship. So other believers, you know, for protection, basically, to protect us spiritually, to remain in the fellowship. Okay. So in 1 Peter 5:8, I'll read that. It says, be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking anyone to, or someone to devour. So that's where we gotta be on, you know, anything that, you know, pulls us away from, you know, the crowd, you know, our church crowd or our fellowship can be detrimental to our spiritual well-being. But also false teachings. They're particularly insidious. There's a guy in my work I've been sharing with, his wife died a few years ago. She was a devout Roman Catholic. He's kind of Catholic. He goes to a Catholic church. But I was surprised with how much he really knew about the Bible. You know, he was discussing purgatory. He believes that, you know, hey, you get a second chance, just in case, you know, you didn't get everything quite right while you're living. You go to purgatory, you know, and then your relatives and your friends can pray you out. You know, I was telling them, you know, pretty much when you die, showing them scripture that your fate is sealed when you die. You know, so trying to correct it. He didn't even know when I was sharing with him a few years ago about homosexuality. That the Bible, here's what the Bible talks about. He didn't know that. So he was just going to church, getting a message. It was just something to do, you know, and the fellowship is so much more than that. That's not, you know, when I see a church like that, I see like people aren't taking care of each other. Things that are more important. It's more than just something to do. You might as well just go to work because you're getting the same thing out of it. Okay. Let's see. So the question I did ask him was, you know, would you follow what the church teaches, or will you follow what the word teaches? And if we go to Acts 17:11, it talks about the Bereans. Now we all know that the Bereans were considered more noble than the Thessalonians, right?
Yeah.
Because they received the word with eagerness, but they actually examined the scripture to see what Paul said was true. So I guess to kind of sum up what I just was talking about, you want to stay, I guess, in the herd or the body and stay in the word. If you don't do both of those things, you run the risk of kind of walking away or slipping away from the word. So since we're a part of a community, what affects one affects all of us, right?
That's right.
We're all part of one body. You know, and I'm just, you know, with my diabetes, I'm thankful I still got 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 ears,
Right.
and all that, because I tell you, if I lost one, then the rest of my body is going to complain. Okay, but in 1 Corinthians 12:26, it states that if one part of the body suffers, every part suffers with it.
Yeah.
If one is honored, all rejoice together. And I'm just thinking of, you know, Jensen and Sarah's and Joelle's and Maggie's babies. You know, that's a time to rejoice. You know, we all rejoice with that, you know, with them together. And I notice when you guys get like a new car or whatever, you guys have a little ritual you guys got to go through for that. And I thought that's great because that drives home the fact. What do we see out in the world? Oh, look what they got across the street. How come I don't have one? You know, or a car or whatever, you know. So we have to rejoice when others rejoice. It doesn't matter. We're not looking inward. We're looking outwards. But that also goes when one of us suffers. We need to,
That's right.
you know, hold them together, you know, to bring them healing. Okay, so let's get to Nehemiah 5. Let's see. I'm going to start with we're going to go. Let's see if I can get someone to read verse 1 through 8. Let's see. Joel, you want to read that one? Thank you.
Now the men and their wives raised a great outcry against their fellow Jews. Some were saying, "We and our sons and daughters are numerous. In order for us to eat and stay alive, we must get grain." Others were saying, "We are mortgaging our fields, our vineyards, and our homes to get grain during the famine." Still, others were saying, "We have had to borrow money to pay the king's tax on our fields and vineyards. Although we are of the same flesh and blood as our fellow Jews, and though our children are as good as theirs, yet we have to subject our sons and daughters to slavery. Some of our daughters have already been enslaved, but we are powerless because our fields and vineyards belong to others." When I heard their outcry, and these charges, I was very angry. I pondered them in my heart, in my mind, and then accused the nobles and officials. I told them, "You're charging your own people interest." So I called together a large meeting to deal with them and said, "As far as possible, we have bought back our fellow Jews who were sold to the Gentiles. Now you are selling your own people only for them to be sold back to us." They kept quiet because they could find nothing to say. That one.
Yes, through, yeah, you got it. Thank you. Okay, if I can get somebody online, to read verse 9 through 13.
I'll read, Rob.
Thank you.
So I continued, what are you doing? What you are doing is not right. Shouldn't you walk in the fear of our God to avoid the reproach of our Gentile enemies? And I and my brothers and my men are also lending the people money and grain. But let us stop charging interest. Give back to them immediately their fields, vineyards, olive groves, and houses, and also the interest you are charging them, 1% of the money, grain, new wine, and olive oil. We will give it back, they said, and we will not demand anything more from them. We will do as you say. Then I summoned the priests and made the nobles and the officials take an oath to do what they had promised. That's an end.
Oh, thank you, Sal. And I'll go ahead and finish up there. Starting at verse 13. I also shook out the folds of my robe and said, in this way, may God shake out of his house and possessions every man who does not keep this promise. So may such a man be shaken out and emptied. At this, the whole assembly said, Amen, and praised the Lord. And the people did as they had promised. Moreover, from the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when I was appointed to their governor in the lands of Judah, until the 32nd year, 12 years, neither I nor my brothers ate the food allotted to the governor. But the earlier governors, those preceding, placed a heavy burden on the people and took 40 shekels of silver from them, in addition to food and wine. Their assistants also lorded it over the people. But out of reverence for God, I did not act like that. Instead, I devoted myself to the work of this on this wall. All my men were assembled there for the work. We did not acquire any land. Furthermore, 150 Jews and officials ate at my table, as well as those who came to us from the surrounding nations. Each day, 1 ox, 6 choice sheep, and some poultry were prepared for me. And every 10 days, an abundant supply of wine of all kinds. In spite of all this, I never demanded the food allotted to the governor, because the demands were heavy on these people. Remember me with favor, oh my God, for all I have done for these people. So, Jews come back from exile. Okay, they start rebuilding the wall, and that's a big job as it is. You got opposition from the other nations around them. Okay, and there's a famine on top of that. And then on top of that, the nobles are actually taking advantage of the situation. So they couldn't get any worse than that. So all of that, it doesn't seem to be like a much of a community going on right now. You're not really taking care of each other. The only one that's listening is Nehemiah. Okay. Okay, so we're going to look at how Nehemiah responded to this. So obviously he was deeply troubled by what was going on. He confronted the nobles. Okay, he accused them of violating God's law by charging interest to fellow Jews. He said, "You're exacting usury, each from his brother." Something I didn't know, that Jews weren't supposed to charge interest to each other. They could charge outsiders, but you think, well, hey, these so-called Pharisees, I guess, should know better, right? They would never do that. But throughout history, Jewish law maintained that prohibition. in the book of Ezekiel, we'll go to Ezekiel 18:13. Sam, when you get there, if you can read that for me, please.
Ezekiel 18:13.
13.
Okay. He says, he lends at interest and takes a profit. Will such a man live? He will not, because he has done all these detestable things. He is to be put to death. His blood will be on his own head.
Thank you, Scott. There's a few other verses that kind of, back up this prohibition. But he addressed this directly with them. It was already enshrined in Jerusalem not to do this. By the way, this was the first point, just addressing issues directly. But Nehemiah, by his example, he's addressing these problems head on. Because problems usually don't go away, they just get worse.
Yep.
You put it off procrastination, you just don't want to deal with it. It's not going away. You still need to get your driver's license. That test is still coming. The taxes still need to be paid. But sometimes if we have like an issue with the church, before we take communion, we're supposed to examine ourselves, right? If we feel someone's got something against us or vice versa, we have to deal with that. Because that's where disunity is going to start. In Matthew 5:23 and 24, talks about this. It devises reconciliation with a brother before offering gets to the altar. Or Matthew 18:15, it tells us go directly to that person who wronged you and resolve it, privately. So when we do this, when we address these issues before, a bad weed grows up, if resentment grows up within our community, this will keep it together if we deal with it. Okay. The second point, standing up for justice. Now we see that Nehemiah, hears the outcry. And you can, when you guys hear about injustice, I don't know about you, but my wife notices it. When I read something and I say, I don't care who's against, I see an injustice, it makes me angry. You can see Nehemiah, just like Jesus in the temple courts, had a righteous indignation about what was going on. Okay, so he took immediate action. He was saying, what you're doing is not right. Don't you fear God? And on top of that, okay, this is really important. He is saying, okay, everyone around all these other nations are watching this. They're seeing you do this. Okay, we're no different than they are. You're taking advantage. So the Bible has some things to say about how the world views us. Because they're already looking to ways to accuse us, right? So we don't need to feed that narrative. So in Galatians 6:10, sorry, and I'll read that. It says, so then, as we have the opportunity, let us do good to everyone, and especially to those who are of the household of faith. So that's our first priority, everyone. But we can't neglect those within our community, within our church. You go to Matthew 5:14 through 16. And Dan, if you can read that one.
Matthew 5:14 to 16.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
You are the light of the world. A town built on hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see you good deed and glorify your Father in heaven.
Thank you, Actually appreciate that. Yeah, so we're called to be a light.
Yeah.
We can't hide it. you know, at all. Hide it in a room, cover it, whatever. We're meant to be, you know, shining that light so the world can see it. In 1 Peter 2:12, I'll read that one. It says, keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the days of visitation. So obviously this highlights the importance of maintaining, you know, good conduct, because it can influence how others perceive God and the Christian faith.
Yeah.
So we treat them how they want to be treated, or how we would like to be treated, but especially how we treat each other. Because if we don't treat each other the way we should, they will never, you know, they're going to get a wrong idea of what it means to be a Christian. Okay. The third point I have is about prioritizing community well-being. And this is where Nehemiah was coming from. You know, he had a deep concern for the whole community. You know, he talked about, you know, let's restore the fields, the vineyards, olive groves, houses, everything to rightful owners. And he prioritized the community over himself. The Bible talks to, I mean, to Jesus, he came to be served, right? No, but to serve. Okay. So community is a, you know, I guess a vital aspect of our spiritual life. You know, Bible talks about gathering together and supporting one another, devoting ourselves to fellowship and prayer, and to shared experience and mutually supporting each other. In Galatians 6:2, it states, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. And it just highlights that the mutual support we have for each other within the church. Point number 4. Okay.
Come on, Rob.
Lead by example. And obviously, there's a few verses here in Nehemiah, but he demonstrated strong leadership because he prioritized the welfare of the people over himself. He talks about the earlier governors used to put a heavy burden on the people. He was not having any of that. You know, he sacrificed for the community. So Nehemiah, he just didn't talk the talk, he actually walked the walk.
Yeah.
He refused to take the governor's food allowance. You know, his actions set a standard for ethical leadership and community responsibility. So the Bible emphasizes the importance of leading by example. You know, encouraging leaders to model good behavior in speech, conduct, love, faith, and purity. And obviously Jesus, you know, presented the ultimate example of servanthood and humility, teaching that true leadership involves serving others. Okay. Okay. Okay, fifth point about practicing generosity. Okay, it's a recurring theme in Nehemiah 5.
Yeah.
He provided for many at his table. You know, we talked about the 150 Jews and officials, you know, and I can't say how, you know, how much generosity encourages people. When I first started coming to the church, what got me to church? Food. At the church, at the end of the church service, you know, in Germany, it would be a potluck. And my friend, his name happens to be Dan at work as well. But when I was talking to him about what keeps people, I told him how long our service was. It's not long enough. 2 hours? That's not long enough. Because when they used to go to church on base, when it was open, after church, it would be a potluck every Sunday. He says, that's what keeps people there, is the food. Because when you eat, you're all having fun, you know, you're all talking. That community helps to build. And I know we only got 2 hours, so that's why I'm trying to finish a little bit early so we can have some more, fellowship time. But never discount that fact, if we ever go back to just having Bible talks at home or whatever, have food, I mean, we see it when we invite people to the house for Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever. Do you see how that feels, having everyone there and food? It's different. When he goes, like you said, after church is done, everyone's gone. They hardly say hi to each other. And on top of that, they haven't learned anything. Okay. So about practicing, generosity. It's a virtue that reflects God's love and compassion. In 2 Corinthians 9:7, it emphasizes giving cheerfully and not reluctantly, highlighting that true generosity comes from the heart and benefits both the giver and the receiver. I mean, I feel guilty because I feel like I'm receiving more than I'm giving, and that giving is to others, giving to me. And I see the smiles on your faces. I see all the food you take home. So in Romans 12:13, it says, share with God's people who are in need. Practice hospitality.
Yeah.
And this is important too. And this is where sometimes this is the difficult part, I think, that doesn't get, addressed because we keep it, our needs to ourselves sometimes. But in James 2:16, it states that someone who says to a brother or sister in need, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does not provide for the physical needs, it is no benefit. So this emphasizes the importance of, I guess, the mere words without deeds are ineffective. Uh, think that, like so I know sometimes, there's many needs. There can be financial, emotional, hey, can you help me fix my computer or whatever. There's many different ways of meeting needs. Some are easier to approach others than some. But for those difficult times when, people need food or clothing or whatever, you just sometimes reach out to somebody that you trust in church. Don't have to broadcast it because that might be embarrassing, I guess, for some people, stuff like that. Okay, 6 points. I'll try to go through here this pretty quick. So Nehemiah, despite his position, he remained humble. Okay, he didn't lord it over them. He didn't exact anything from the people. In Philippians 2:3 and 4, it says, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others better than yourselves. And I said, this, in First Peter also at 5:3, it advises leaders not to dominate those entrusted to them, but be examples. So in everything we do, obviously everything we do for the Lord, but we do it all out of humility, reverence for God. So to conclude here, Nehemiah 5 teaches that community well-being is essential. One is suffering, we all suffer. And one rejoices, we all rejoice. We have to remember that. We have to emphasize the importance of justice, being selfless, address any internal conflicts that come up, right off the bat. The Bible has a lot to say about unity, and that's how we maintain the unity. Addressing these issues, fellowshipping, praying together, unity among ourselves, helps us to overcome any challenges, make sure that we maintain the collective good. When we think about the Bible in general, it emphasizes the importance of love, support, and responsibility towards one another. We are encouraged to care for one another and build a fellowship rooted in faith and shared values. So let's continue to, to encourage one another, pray together, and pray for each other. You know, the fellowship, and lean on, for each other for wisdom and advice, and just meet everyone's needs. That's all I have tonight.
Man, thank you so much for that, Rob. That was very insightful, and I like how you kind of